to start off by first saying thank you very much for taking the time to meet me on this channel, and I'll just share a little bit about it as well, so you know when I hear myself talk about it. So, as you know, my journey has been with you, and we'll talk more about this in the interview. But I realize there's a really big need now, more than ever in these new times, for people to get to have conversations with each other around what it's like, not just in terms of what it takes to build a business, but I think what it takes to be the type of person who has a lifestyle around the business. And as you know, we've been on that journey together for a while. So I came up with this interview platform or place where I'd love to ask you more questions that are sometimes connected to business, but there's a series of questions that are more connected to helping people who are maybe outside the business community just understand a true lifestyle that an entrepreneur has, at least in your capacity. And then at the end, we can maybe wrap up with just a couple of maybe life questions or messages that you might have for anyone who's looking to engage, who might resonate with you. So would that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So yeah, so that's what we basically coined the podcast or in the interview platform as Niche 360. It's just about a 360-degree leader who's considerate around things like life, family, friends, health, just pretty much everything that it does take for you to show up on Monday morning for your business. So maybe just to kick off with, I'd love to share a little bit about you and how we met, and then dive into a couple of questions there, so some people get to know who you are. So maybe you could share from your side, when was the first time you met me or met Leaders of Tomorrow brand? What were your impressions then, and how did you get to having a coaching relationship with Leaders of Tomorrow?
Do you really want me to share that story?
Yep.
So I was at an event here in Perth at a hotel, and the first time we met you was at this event, and it turned out your energy was so different to everyone else. No disrespect to the organizers, but at that time they were running a fashion show, but the lights weren't on, so we couldn't.
I remember that. Yeah.
So we couldn't see people, and then there's this silhouette just in the background, and it turned out you were also a co-MC. So it was a great event. But after that, I had another friend of mine as well, and we just both decided to connect with you after the event. So that was in Perth, and I met you at a pub, and we chatted, and clearly it was a synergies check. Now I know what that is. Just to make sure I kind of qualified. But if someone's paying for drinks, why would I complain?
That's right. That's right.
So, but that's how it started, and that was October 2013. So that was then, yeah.
Wow, 2013. And had you had a coach before? Because I know you also, when I met you, in a transition with a relationship with another business partner who started off as a mentor, I think, from memory. So
yeah,
what was that journey about?
I think both of those words are like an overstatement. Partner.
Yeah.
So yes, so I was going through that, and I was looking for a business coach, but I had connected with some business coaches, and most of them, to be very frank, were all about the dollars. They didn't see me. So one was like acting like, you know what, just pay me XYZ and then we can start working together, knowing fully well I didn't have that kind of money. And others were like, we need to work on your mission and vision, which is great if your business is not in turmoil. But the last thing I wanted to do was to work on my bloody mission and vision. Can I swear?
Yes.
That was very mild. But yeah, I didn't want to work on my freaking mission and vision. I wanted to get my business back on track. After the business partner fights and everything, I saw a vision for it. I realized I needed it as much as it needed me. And I recognized that I wanted it, because at first I thought, am I just holding on to a problem? But it turned out I was holding on to, like you say, a lifestyle that I was seeking.
And when we did meet, just to dive into it, we kind of touched on what your purpose was for starting your business in the first place. So would you mind sharing a little bit more about why you got into business and what kept you in business, perhaps?
Well, there was two things. Coming from an African heritage and being the firstborn daughter, I had this responsibility to actually hold up my family. It was implied more than actually said, but it's a strong implication as other people will experience, possibly not just African cultures. So there was that, and I was like, I want to see my mom taken care of. But then there was the value side where I saw in Africa, if you told people, this is how much it's going to cost, that's what you're going to pay. So I came from that background, and in the industry I was working in at the time, everyone charged by the hour, and I couldn't see how that value could actually translate into a relationship, especially if you're charging by the hour for inefficiencies. And there were many moments like that where I was conflicted to put my time down because I'd spend half an hour in the filing room looking for a file that was sitting on someone else's desk, or the system was down and I had to charge that time. So I realized clients really were just happy with black and white quotes within reason. And that's how I started it initially. And that was my vision for it, to offer services without the billable hour beast.
So did you feel like you were more innovative in that time? Because I know when we talked, and this is something that we also encourage, is like the hourly wage doesn't work. But I mean, if the rest of the industry was doing it, I mean, what came up for you? Was if there was any resistance or challenges to carrying that out? What was the reaction to the industry when they heard about your pricing and your model?
It's such a good question. I'm going to copy that. I need the recording, okay? What's wrong with you? So that was the thing, the industry itself. So I thought I had a supportive industry and realized resources I was Googling and all of that stuff were not resonating with my business model. Networking, and I'd get the snobby people going, oh no, you just cannot bill. You need to have timesheets. And it's like, trust me, mate, if I know how much money I'm going to make at the end of the year, then that's fine. And it's still the same. So the whole time, I probably only had a handful of billable hour clients. And the last client was actually like very much 4 years ago. And since then, I haven't had an hourly client. I look at the value and it works. It really works. Of course, I know when it comes to teams and stuff, I think the billable hour is a micromanagement tool. And that's old fashioned in my view. Now it's all about managing outcomes, not managing tasks. That's how you manage your team. And if other industries can actually thrive on that way of doing things, so can we.
That's right. That's right. So how did your business partner take it, or at the time when you were transitioning? Because I'm assuming you guys did see eye to eye on this approach. So how did that go for you? What were the consequences by the end of it?
To be honest, yeah, I don't think in front of me they would say, yeah, it's a great idea. But behind my back, they would be talking and engaging clients. One had to obviously be the work monkey, and the other one obviously had to bring in the income. So I was the person doing the work because I was seemingly, I'm serious, less experienced. But they were seemingly more experienced, but it was just a big mouth that could run really well. That's all it was. And at the end of our partnership, it became very clear when I was trying to reconnect with clients after their exit that they didn't believe in that model, because some clients were like, no, you're meant to charge me by the hour. But in some respects, that was the early days of me actually standing my ground, something I wasn't really taught. I was only 4 years into the industry, but one thing I did know is I couldn't last another 4 years. So I was learning that side of things, and I realized I'm an accountant, but I'm not a business owner. No one's taught me how to run a business. I can run the numbers, I can't run a business. So knowing that and the value around that, it was just so hard to get people to really see my vision.
Yeah.
I had so much negativity, and I even had at times I had two business partners. So one of the other ones was like, we need to start charging by the hour. We can't make money. But really, what it was just a commitment issue.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. You mentioned that. So, as you were saying about you realizing you're accountant, but you had the gap of realizing you're not a business person. How would you define the difference between the two from your experience now that you know what you know?
That's a good question. The experience is how. Stop it. Like I said, I'm getting this recording, right? So
She probably just posted just out of like, yeah, she said it's a good question. Yeah.
just post it. It's valuable, you know. If you need perfection, you're in the wrong room.
Totally. You know how we roll. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, yeah. What was the question again? It's so like my
Your
mind's
experience with the difference between being an accountant and actually
yes.
running a business. Yeah. What would you
So
say?
how would I define that? Look, I had to really ask myself what I was willing to do and versus what I had to do. And in business, it's more of what you have to do as opposed to what you're willing to do. So I assumed people around me. That's one big mistake. You assume people around you know what they're doing, but that's where your value lies. Ignorance is your business. So I didn't know that. I had clients literally open the door and they start crying. They're that distressed about their numbers. And I was uncomfortable with that, as opposed to realizing this is a relationship building moment. This is what it is about. So I didn't realize the 80-20 rule is definitely that.
Yeah.
It's 80% relationship management and 20% skill.
Wow. That's profound. That's profound. So how did you make that transition, and how long did it take you to make that successful transition where you could look back and go, yeah, now I'm a business owner versus just an accountant?
It took me about a year after meeting you, but before that, I was in this world. I always define it as being in a matrix world. I took
Yeah.
the wrong pill,
Yeah.
and then I went back and decided I'll take the other pill. I can't remember if it's the blue or green pill.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it took about a year of working with you and realizing that personal development is a necessity. It's a need. It's not a want, because there's things that you grow up being exposed to. There's values that you don't realize you have. Whether you believe them or not, they affect your life. So, you know, I believed that being female, I didn't deserve a spot at the table, which I didn't realize until I tried to take a spot at the table, and this inner voice was like, not your turn. So those things, and knowing that I am the expert in the room because people are looking for my services. If they were the experts in the room, they wouldn't be looking for me. I wouldn't be in that room. And you might think that's egotistical, but it's not. It's just reinforcing your value. There's
Yeah.
a reason why people say, can we have a meeting?
Yeah.
There is something they see in you that they've recognized, I need that. And you have to honor that. So that took me about a year, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't, I don't know, people would just go, it took a year. It was a painful year of a lot of realizations. And we had one coaching session in Melbourne, and the penny dropped in that session that I had to make some tough decisions if I really wanted to switch things up. It wasn't a Hail Mary business anymore. It was, I had to make decisions. It was actions, consequences, opportunities, results.
Yeah.
It wasn't a let's see what happens kind of approach. Or it wasn't even a case of, oh, the government will help me out. It was not that. So when that kicked in, that was the beginning. It was probably December 2013. And I was stunned. After our session, we were technically late to the airport, and the person I was with was panicking. And I was just like, oh, that doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
Take my time before I go back to act on this. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, and they were like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's just I just don't feel that. I feel that this existence has been a farce all this time. So that realization was powerful for me. In that it was a hard session. I think it's like you were literally yelling at me, and I don't know who was sitting in front of you until the last 20 minutes.
Mm. Mm.
A robot, probably.
Mm. I do remember that. It was a Makio Hotel or whatever that was. That place. Yeah. Yeah, good times. We still took a photo and it looked like we were happy by the end. So I think there is a shot of that. So that
that was before you laid into my ass, just to be
oh,
fair.
that was the before after, not the after.
I didn't want to take
Okay.
photos with you afterwards. Yeah.
So that's interesting. So maybe just to share a little bit more about that, because you mentioned it was difficult, and you were aware that even though things were rushing ahead, you were slower in some of the decisions you had to make. What were the first things you actually took action on that maybe you were afraid of based on our coaching session that you think made a difference looking back?
So this is a great session. Now my child's in the background. So, so the first steps was really the initial first step was to ask for help. I have so much pride, and I was that A grade student. I was in a class of super dorks, and I wish I was in the B grade sometimes, because that would have made my life so much easier than being in the A grade, because I was like, perfection, we need perfection. So asking for help was important. It was important to be vulnerable. And I think that's what you were looking for with me when we had the first meeting, to see how thick my walls were, or my ego was, really. It's not so much the walls, it's the ego. So I did that, and then I let go of employees. Shit.
What was that like for you?
It happened in two instances. The first instance was pre-U, and I thought, I was 27 at the time. So I thought, I felt bad, and I literally turned it into a business funeral. I was crying. I was letting the world know that this is a bad idea. I spent all day thinking my life is over, and I cried and everything. And that person, after that, was very difficult to deal with post retrenchment or redundancy. Then the second person, who I just went through I actually worked. I was like, I'm not going to waste this day. And I gave them tasks to do and everything. And they came up to me, and I gave them the letter, and I explained.
You go on mute for some reason. Sorry. Hello? Hello? You're muted. I couldn't hear you.
Well,
Now
I
you're
don't know
back.
what happened.
Yeah, you're back. I don't know. It just kind of like silenced itself. So you were saying your first employee, and you gave him a letter to fire them, but then you went mute from there.
Oh, so I've just been like,
yeah, it looked great.
Well, that's good. I can reduce the F bombs now. So, and if you notice, I'm trying to be gender neutral so that people don't think it just happens to male or females.
Yeah, I know,
it's
right?
Anybody.
Tell me about it.
So this is where it's politically correct. So
we'll try for a while.
Yeah. So that first employee, when I let them go, I cried my little heart out. I spent all day thinking, this is it, my life is over. I spent the day, it was the worst day, and I made it that way, to be honest. I woke up going, oh shit. I went about my day going, oh shit, oh this, go to the printer, oh damn, and I drove to a client. I saw a client with that attitude.
Imagine.
They're no longer my client, obviously. I mean, come on. I was just weeping. I was still in that mode of, someone will fix it. I don't want to do it. I'm too young for this, whatever. But I was responsible, so I did that. But I cried during the redundancy, and sorry, just hold. Okay. Paul, this is Jeez, that was a hard segment.
That's all right. Go on.
So, and the second employee was a lot different, because I just went through my day. I realized I'm not going to waste time anymore. Was the first employee. I was crying and everything. I thought that's how you show people that you care. There's a big difference. Like there's caring and being respectful,
Yeah.
and there's moments where that's required. So the first employer, I guess, thought it was a joke and thought they could take advantage of the situation and try and take the upper hand. So they were a bit of a pain, and
I
you
remember.
would be a pain, I guess, if you felt bitter, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it was purely because of the way I delivered. Maybe they could have behaved that way otherwise. But the second employee, I wrote the letter up, everything was ready. We sold a vehicle as well to pay them off. To I wanted to pay them their entitlements. There was a fine line, but I wanted to be on the good side of that line. So we sold a vehicle in order to make it happen, and didn't see a cent of that money, to be honest, and paid her out everything, gave her her letter, and I said, there it is, this is for you. So they said, well, thank you so much for the experience you've given me, you've been amazing. And since then we're friends. I've been to their bridal shower, their baby shower, I'm going to the next baby's shower. And they're my client.
Yes.
They've started their own business as well.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
that was very different, I think. But it also showed me that it's hard to get people like that who actually see your vision, because they saw my vision more than anyone else. Yeah, so those decisions were the tough ones, I would say, in the early days. They had to be made. I looked at my profit and loss, and I needed to cut costs. And there was obviously the rent, which was harder to break away from. And then there was the team, and I had to break the team down to regain control in some way. I could have been braver, but we all say that.
Okay, so you mentioned they're now a client, so it actually brings me well to the next question here. Is like, how would you define what an ideal client is for you, and what would then be also the opposite of that, which is a bad client? Can you give an example?
Okay, that's a good point. So a good client for me is someone who they want to learn. Firstly, they have to show this inkling of learning. I'm not the person where clients are like, you just do everything. Ignorance is not bliss. They become a problem, because how can you grow if you're not even aware of your numbers? So they needed to show that they can pay as another one. That's really important. Hard to manage, but really important. So I put safeguards in place. If I feel okay, they want to learn, but they can't pay me, I kind of put a safeguard in place of, well, if you want us to work together, this is how I work, or pay me up front. So those are the two main ones. There's not much gender, but I guess in a way they have to have a feminine vibe. The misogyny has plenty of seats. So they just have to have a feminine vibe, understanding of the fact that I'm a mom, and I'm not going to work 60 hours a week for you. And I'm not exactly the person that you're going to find available all the time. Like they just need to be a person, reasonable. Yeah. And to some extent they do refer, but that's not a big requirement, because when my business broke down, I broke down sections of it, and I found people to refer business to me. And we have strong mutual agreements. Some of them are, well, they're written actually to some extent. Like every client, we talk about how we're going to work together. And that's how I get the referrals, because they're bookkeepers and they need someone to do the tax return. And what they found is, at the time when I noticed this, they were struggling to refer clients to a tax accountant, because the client would then be pinched by that accountant. And I made that promise to them that you do you, I do me. We do our strengths and we stay in our lane, and it works really well for me.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm assuming then your main ideal client is a bookkeeper. Is that right?
That would be true. Yes.
That would be true. Okay, good.
That would be very true.
So that is right. Okay. And so
They just don't pay me, but they refer quite well,
yeah,
and in return, I do their work for free or at a really reduced cost.
that's good to know. That opens up a lot of doors if that was the focus. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So, and then what about a non-ideal client? What's been your experience of a non-ideal client, or something that maybe happened that made you go, this is not ideal for me? And I know you've had a good fair share of this.
I've got a lot. Who do I pick? Well, okay, I'll tell you one. If life changes happen. So before I started the business, I didn't have a child. So there was one client who just didn't see us working together because I was pregnant. Hell, I hadn't even dropped this kid yet.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
even know what I was having. So that one,
I did.
he did,
Yes.
and I was like, no, can't deal. And that particular client, really surprised me because they closed the gates, but I think they were hoping for me to beg them to
Yeah.
stay.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh, sure, wait, let me get the door for you. Because they were like, I don't think you can run your business and as well as manage your first child. Clearly, imposing their experiences onto me, which was unnecessary. And after that, the funny part is they needed my help with something after I had my daughter. And I'm happy to say I didn't see that email as far as I'm concerned. Apparently, they got in touch. But that's not an ideal client. Another client is if you have couples, like, for example, I attract strong personalities because I do like people down the line, but sometimes they can be irrational. They're down the line, but they're irrational. So those ones are non-ideal, where I sense that the decision maker, the person signing the checks, is not the person really signing the checks. Like a typical case, husband and wife, for example. And this is a true story. So husband ran the business, was happy with my service, but wife always was super irrational and asking a lot of questions. Then one day I just wasn't in the mood for it. And I just said, look, this is so unnecessary. And then I was like, well, then, and she was like, well, deal with it. Isn't that what you're for? And I was like, no, I've got standards. This doesn't work for me. And we hung up the phone. And of course, they went to their partner, and Lord knows what stories we tell each other, right? And when the partner called me and started laying into me, I just calmly said, this isn't working. I had to recognize I can't fight. I can't say, your wife said this.
Yeah.
It's just, there's just no way. So this sounds like a bitch fest. But yeah, so I just ended it, and I was like, look, whatever you're saying, you're right in your mind. And I could tell you what I experienced, but we have to end. And it ended straight away because there was just no way I was going to play he said, she said, especially with couples. So they're unideal. And then others who come to me and I tell them what I charge and they jump back. They certainly don't make it through the door. Because they see the value, and it's happened a few times. They see the value, and then but they still want to dictate how much they want to pay. And I have a problem with that because there's a reason why you're coming to me. You have a problem. And if you feel it's worth XYZ, why haven't you done it yourself then? Like there's some knowledge of it. That's that thing where I did have someone say, you're probably egotistical. I'm like, no, I'm not. I know my worth. I know what it takes to do the job, and it certainly doesn't take this price. That's just how they perceive it.
Yeah.
I would love to have time to explore it more, but in this moment, that's just how I leave it because I've got my own mental wellness to take care of. But there's plenty of moments where they're price-based can't deal. So always going, how much is it? You tell them and they run off. So now that's my litmus test. Initially, I just tell people how much I charge. And some go, yep. And many go, nope. But that saves me 6 months down the line of reminding them why they need to work with me and why I've done them a good job. I'm not saying it's perfect, and it can change. Initially, they appreciate you, but people's businesses change, and sometimes they grow out of you. And there's always other people in this industry who are looking to take clients away from you.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So based on that, and you just segued nicely into some experiences we both had and some of these negative clients, like you said, opening. Um, what have you actually? What are the lessons that you've learned about who you are in the past, and how have those lessons helped you more in life as a mother now?
Oh. So who I was in the past was, I thought I was an introvert because I was an accountant. But I had too many insubordination notes to justify that. And I thought I was reserved, but it turns out me simply saying to people, and how much is this costing the client, got me into a lot of trouble. Yeah. So I delved into my personality, like my true personality, and embraced it. For some reason, I thought if you follow Florence Litoua's book, Personality Plus, it turns out I'm a sanguine. So I love to talk, and I'm also a massive choleric. So I like to drop it like it's hot, mentally. And when I used to think, oh, I just hate the energy, it's because I'm avoiding saying what I'm thinking. So I exclude myself from situations. I don't do well at bridal showers for that reason, where it's speech after speech after speech of just BS. That's me. And now as a mother, I realize it's very important for me to be authentic in front of my child, because I do not want to convey a person that is not me, and then they get confused about how they should be. So I allow my child to express herself and to yell at me in shops, even though my choleric self wants to whoop that ass. Can't do it here. Or lay into her verbally, rather. So I let her know that you can be yourself and we can sit down and have a proper conversation. So I want her to be seen, which I felt wasn't the case being female. I don't feel seen sometimes, and then people get surprised when people still are surprised when I say I run my own business and I have a child. I don't know what's so remarkable about that. I just think there's things you can and can't control, right? And I think Mother Nature's not one of them.
True. Makes sense. So what then would you say you're most proud of that you've accomplished, mastered lately?
Lately, I wouldn't say, okay, I'm going to preface that and say, if you think I'm going to say my child, firstly, I love my child, but that's not the greatest accomplishment. Like,
still doing the show. We don't have to match or anything. Yeah.
No, far out. No, you're not going to hear it from me.
This is not the program you get votes on that one. Trust me.
No, that's good. Yeah. So I'm very proud of sticking with my guns and actually working and taking responsibility. Was that pivotal moment I described at the airport. That was me realizing you either take responsibility or you're literally going to flub the rest of the way in a lie. I felt that was my matrix moment where I was like, I have to fix this. I have to be responsible. So I'm very proud of how I turned this business around and made sure that we went from extreme losses in 1 year to breaking even the next year. At the time, I didn't recognize that as an achievement. I was still in a fixed mindset where it was about being excellent. And part of that rears its ugly head every now and again. So doing those things was great. I haven't gone bankrupt when technically I really should have. I should have given up. But I made the decision that the only way I'm going to give up is when someone comes and takes the keys away from me. Someone comes and literally takes my computer. Someone comes and blocks me from doing anything. And that day never came. So I was looking at my worst case scenario in the face, and I refused to prophesy it. I refused to kind of go, let's make it happen. So, and power in words. I've met a lot of clients always go, I'll just go bankrupt. That's their resignation. And I just think, be careful what you wish for, because that's going to happen. And I refuse to talk like that. There were always some days where I didn't want to wake up. We all have those days, but I'm so proud of still being here and being able to address those things, the debts that came with it. And I'm still here to say, yeah, I got to the other side, and I'm learning. I probably need to come to Bali to accept it. So I'm learning to accept that that's the journey I needed to go on. There was just no other way. I can't imagine my old self creating the business I had said I had wanted to create.
Wow, that's very profound. And I've definitely been there with you in that journey, and it's not an easy one. So that is definitely a high accomplishment. So, what would you say that you've mastered then? So you talked about your accomplishment, but what do you think you've mastered lately?
I've mastered a way of saying no without actually saying no.
Okay, what do you mean?
When I get in touch with people, when people get in touch with me, I just wait,
Mm.
you know? I just wait and see. And it's because I just want to see who they really are. And some people have a certain perception. I don't know what it's called. It's the opposite of servant leadership. They think that simply because you are paying someone, you own them. So I want to see that. And it comes up. Sometimes it's like, I called you and you didn't call me back. And it turns out the phone call was on a Saturday afternoon, a
Mm.
weekend. So
Mm.
those, and I just sit back and I'm getting good. It's listening to my intuition is what I'm trying to say, because that's what would frustrate me, where my intuition is yelling at me and I ignore it. And I'm not regretting the impact if the client moves on, if they come back, because those are my people where they're understanding that we are all doing something at a different time in life. Just because I sent you a text message doesn't necessarily mean I'm available to pick it up. So that's the intuition is something I'm really proud of. It might come off as harsh, but I've had way too many moments where I've ignored my intuition, and the thing that my intuition warns me about happens.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So, how would you describe intuition, just in case someone is listening to this and wants to better hone in on listening, quote unquote, because we hear this in the business community quite a bit. So how would you define intuition? What's a good example that you would give us?
For me, it's a moment where something just makes you go, oh, like it just hits you.
Mm.
Some
On the
people
face
have
or in the arm, or where is it hitting?
it could be no, it could be just in my mind. Like I could be cooking and I just have this thought. So it's a thought coming over and over and over
Mm,
again,
repeatedly.
and
Okay.
it's just manifesting, and it's like, what are you talking about? So then I just take a step back. And the other thing is being present. Like when people say being present, I didn't know what that meant. It's really just working on what's in front of you in that moment and not
Yeah.
forcing things to happen. It's just kind of dealing with the uncertainty. COVID is the best example of that,
Okay.
where yes, you had these workshops, yes, you had this launch you wanted to do, yes, you wanted to do all of it. It's just waiting for that, because that could, if you try and force it, you spend more money. You start to do things you don't even, you market the product to markets you don't actually like. So it's a knock. So some people have a gut thing where they just feel a little off, or they can't sleep at night.
Mhm.
And for me, sometimes I can't sleep, and I have to name what the problem is, otherwise I won't sleep at all. I
Mm,
need to have more sleep, apparently.
okay. And that was a really good conversation, because I did put a question here about the COVID-19 has impacted quite a lot of businesses. I mean, I coach people in 5 continents. Some of them in some shape or form have been impacted. But how, if any, has COVID-19 impacted your business? And what are the lessons that you've learned about yourself in this time?
So the impact for me is it's still in hiatus. in terms of financial, but straight away when COVID was announced, the government here was scrambling to get some sort of assistance out and launch it. But it was literally every day. It was like gossip rag of tax. 1 minute you're doing this, next minute you're doing that. So I barely worked. My productivity sank completely because I was getting more phone calls than usual, more emails than usual, and because I bill based on value instead of hourly, it was very hard to then just send an invoice because it was outside of what I do. But I also recognized this was a relationship moment where clients needed help. So I spent much of April and March just doing those calls. Like if I showed you my April balance sheet, it would have made people go, should you be trading? What have you been doing? Even though I worked a lot more than before. So I've got a hole that I'm plugging at the moment. So everyone's got turnover that's less. But the lesson I learned was you must have a reserve. You must have money put aside. All those fixed expenses, if you don't know what a fixed cost is, you need to know what that is because those are the costs that will sink your business, the ones you can't run away from. So they're not linked to income. Rent is a good example. You have to pay rent whether or not you're making a sale.
Yeah.
Loans, all of that. So it's important to put money aside for stuff like that all the time. Another thing I learned was technology is your friend. Absolutely. Like I met businesses who were just starting to change their business so they could work in a COVID environment. And it's such a headache to do it in that kind of manner
Yeah.
because you're learning all this troubleshooting. So if you're against technology for personal reasons, think for business. I'm not a fan of Facebook, but I'm on Facebook because that's where business happens.
Yeah.
And it's important to kind of know. And maybe that's where your market is. Some might argue they're not, but to be honest, okay, how are you going to grow? So you need technology. You don't have to have the bee's knees or, you just need to embrace the basics. Like it was surprising to me that some restaurants in Australia didn't have a way for people to order online.
Yeah.
They were just getting to know how to do that because they didn't want to use Uber Eats. And when they went on Uber Eats, some of them launched with higher prices and pretty much pissing off the people that used to come into their businesses before COVID.
Yeah.
Because who do you think is on Uber Eats now? And you're doubling your prices. So that, having careful considerations like that, because that was a reactive response. They're like, right, a plate costs $3.90. You know what? We're going to make it $5.50. And it's like, where do you think, who's actually going to buy this stuff? It's your clients, customers who miss you, who just want to experience you again. Don't get me wrong, people will pay a bit more because they understand there's an extra cost.
Yeah.
But don't kick sand in people's faces. So that was clearly a reactive approach,
Yeah.
but that's how they use technology. So if there's something you don't do because you're making too much or enough money, then do your reserves, get your reserves up and running, and then use those reserves when the time comes to invest properly in the software that you need. We all want more time ultimately, so why resist it?
True. True that. True that. So, what do you think is the general advice that, since you're also connected to businesses like I am, but in the tax way or whatever, what do you think more people should know that they don't know about what to do in business for COVID? Like you mentioned, one of them was make sure you have reserves. As you know, people are sometimes constantly investing back in the business to save it. But what else would you say is important that they should have known that if they did, they might have maybe had a smoother journey through the COVID
Get a bloody budget. I would have said a mofo budget, but if you don't have a budget, I don't understand. I know the word sounds boring. So what? Get over it. It's like tax. Just get over it. The number of people I've met who don't have a budget, who can't even forecast their income. Like forecasting is hard because there's no certainty, but you need a totem pole. You need to go, today I'm gonna reach there. Because some people say, I want to make 10,000 a month, and it's like, well, what are you doing now? About 2,000. There's a big gap there. So that's the lesson. That's how big your lesson is if you want to go. So have a budget. A budget will tell you where you're going. A budget will preempt the conversations you need to have with people, your suppliers, so you don't end up lying to them when you can't meet the promise or the commitment.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, no, I love that. And just a question on challenges. That's a really good one that a lot of people I think are still navigating. Um, what are the main challenges that maybe you're facing at the moment when it comes to, if any, moment when it comes to say juggling between your professional life as an entrepreneur and your intimate life or your family life as a mom and a partner to an amazing guy that we both know I love. How do you navigate that?
So this is just time with him.
Yeah, just everything with being a mom,
Oh,
being a
okay.
business owner, being intimate, also not neglecting your partner, not neglecting your daughter. You probably just say, I neglect my partner, I don't care. But all those things. How do you navigate that?
Well, the biggest challenge is energy levels, managing the energy levels. It's like a relay race that never ends when you've got children. So we keep trying new things. So, and if it works, we try and commit to it because with a young child, the challenge is they grow so quickly and they change so quickly. 6 months ago,
Yeah.
the things she's saying is so different and the things she needed us for were so different. And as an adult, that's the challenge because you're just like, I thought we had this down pat, and now we're potty training, which is like it's the big nightmare. So it's just managing energy levels, and we've recognized that we need time together away from the house more than within the house. Some people do really well where they can have a movie night together and stuff. But when I'm busy and I know my laptop is upstairs
Mm.
or downstairs or something, it's so easy to just kind of pick up your phone and, this is how you do your relationship. It's literally like, oh, Charles has a baby. I know, right? It's all happening on the phones. So I don't have an answer for that. It frustrates me a bit that there's the perfection because I love it when I'm working. I hate the process to get to the chair to start working. But the changes I've made is I work from home now. I've never been good at working from home. I went to boarding school when I was 10. So I've always been in a clinical environment from such a young age. But now I'm working from home and it works really well for me, saves me money. And I'm just learning that, okay, there's washing downstairs, don't do it. So it's definitely in the moment. Um, that's the main challenge for me because I like to explore new things. And I realized I'm letting that go. So communication is so important.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
no joke. Like I sound like I'm nagging, but I probably mention things before it gets really bad because when you get upset,
yeah.
when I get upset, I'm not thinking straight and I'm dropping bombs like a nuclear facility. I'm just and and before someone has a chance to acknowledge what I'm saying, they're wiped out. Like it's just one thing after the next. So I try not to get to that point where you're fed up and it's almost like you're resigned,
Yeah.
which is so easy to do. So don't keep it together and you know instead of sharing it on a Facebook group and getting advice from strangers, share it with the person that's concerned with it
It's really
because
good
you're just
advice.
running away from the yeah you're just running away from the problem
Yeah.
and you're just airing your dirty laundry, to be quite honest, for people's entertainment.
We're gonna put a quote around that. Just some final questions because I don't want to take up more of your time, but just a final few. But so, which people would you say inspire you at the moment in the industry or in life?
People who inspire me,
Mm.
Mel Robbins,
Okay, why is
really
that?
she's down to earth and she calls it for what it is. She doesn't come out there, sell her story, makes you feel so pumped, and then says, now buy my book. And she's not condescending, which I've found sometimes with other inspirational people. They tend to talk in an up there kind of manner. Like, if you're not doing this, you're not going to make it. I'm telling you, listen to me right now. That stuff is good to hear in person because it's, it has an energy to it. But yeah, you don't still want to hear it like that. But also, she comes out, she has said, I suffer from anxiety, I have panic attacks, but
Yeah.
she's still going for her goals. So she's letting you know that she's imperfectly perfect for everything she's doing. And just because she's had a panic attack, just because there's things happening in her life, just because her TV show was cancelled, doesn't make her less relevant in the world. That's why I really like her.
What about in the opposite? What do you think you're most afraid of that you'd like to overcome, if any? Is there anything you're afraid of?
I'm just afraid of, you know, like getting to my deathbed and going, what the hell was I doing? Why did I not try? I want to be on my deathbed and laugh to myself and go, that was crazy. That was fun. I don't want to get to that end. I think there's a book written by a nurse about the top regrets the dying say.
Dying, yes, yes.
So that's what keeps me going, especially when my health suffered at one point quite badly, and I found myself running on a mill for people who they wouldn't come to my funeral if I died. They wouldn't even know that that was the cause of it. So I've tried my hardest to remind myself of that every now and again and go, this is it, this is the only life I have. So I think I need enemies in order to have a great life.
I've heard that a lot actually. Look for some rivals. Give you something to fight for, yeah? Okay. So connected to that,
Well,
so
there
what
was something
okay.
there's another one that says every superhero has an enemy. Every superhero has an enemy.
Not nemesis. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So then what do you think is your full potential? Yeah.
I need to be out and about. I need to honor my personality a bit.
Mm,
People love I think my full potential is I'm actually going for the things I say I'll go for and doing the things I will say I want to do. That's important to me. It's not so much being a promise, but actually creating goals and being able to go, I've ticked those off. Not 100%, but I've made enough progress to progress to
mm,
the next step. Than to sit through a goal setting session and 6 months later, I haven't even taken the right steps to get there. And most goal setting is more like task setting.
nice. So that was connected to my question is, and how do you know you are actually living out your full potential? Like when do you know you're actually in that zone?
That's a good question. I don't think I will, because I don't think that means you've stopped. I'll be constantly reinventing that potential. So I'll be constantly like, okay, we've done this. All right, what's on the list? So I don't want an unending list. I don't want a bucket list that has to be completed. And the pressure of a bucket list, I think, is you're just writing down things that aren't available to you now. Like if you say you want to travel the world in the next 12 months, that's a crazy goal. And if
Mm,
you wrote it on the 1st of Jan, you need to change it. So I just think
mm-hmm.
you just kind of morph your goals every 6 months or so. I'd love to do goal setting every 3 months. Um, and just kind of go, well, this is the next step I want to take. This is the next step I want to take, you know?
Mm,
Because I thought once I paid off my debts in this business, I'm shutting it down. And now I'm like, once I pay my debts, my God, hold on.
mm.
Because I've got goals. I've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
goals to go back into debt.
Yeah, that's it. Welcome to the big game. And just on that note, I wanted to acknowledge you because I know you didn't want to share this, but I would share it anyway with people. You finally paid off some of your very, very big debts and really achieved the goal that you thought was impossible. And I think you finalized that after so many years. So how does that actually feel? How do you feel about yourself for accomplishing that big goal? There's very few people in that position.
I feel great. I managed it I feel really good. I feel
Mm,
like I can do this. I feel it's almost like if potential was a thing, I stroked it a little bit, you know. It's like that evasive cat, like that's what it feels like. But knowing that the things I learned don't expire with that debt, they come into my business. So the techniques and things I used, I share with my clients because it's important for them to learn those techniques. It's a very simple but not easy process. It requires patience. And if anyone has their head in the sand right now, you've literally signed your death certificate for your business. Because I refused to hide away. I refused to ignore the phone calls. I just learned to pick up the phone, as painful as it was, as soul destroying as it was. I learned that if you approach them first, that's more empowering than them coming after you.
Yeah, true that. No, that's really powerful. Thanks for sharing that. A very huge accomplishment there. And okay, just a final few questions there. So, what do you? Yeah, what was I going to ask there? What are the maybe things that you wished people asked you that they don't ask about what actually makes you successful in business?
That's a deep, mate. Is this why I'm not a coach? Jeez. Like the things people don't that I wish they would ask me. I have more clients asking based on fear. I want people to ask me questions based on vision. And there's very few people.
Good response. Go on. There's very few people.
Yeah, there's very few, because it's that herd mentality, which we can't help. We come from systems that are made like that. But when you meet some business owners, which is why I went more to do the education perspective, I meet people in business who've been in business, they say their whole adult life, and yet they still can't read a profit or loss. And, you know, that's when you asked that, I was like, what kind of questions have they been asking for the last 25 years? Or, you know, so I think coming from a place of vision, you know, how can this is where I want to take things. What steps can I take to get there? Let's not focus on paying too much tax, or because those things that's a scorecard. That's like, this is how good you're doing. Now let's just manage that so it doesn't feel so painful every year.
Yeah.
And then you can go, and I've got a handful of clients who just take a little bit of that advice. And then the next year when it's time to do their return, you go, this is how much you have to pay. Great, I've paid it. Hey, I'm ready. Let's lodge. Because that tells me that they're now focusing on something else. It's no longer down here with the taxes and stuff.
Yeah.
They're now like, this is where I need to, now I can pay for a coach. Now I can, you know, I can do all these things. But honestly, a coach is not something you wait to afford to pay. You just do it.
Yeah. Tell me about it. It's never going to be the right time. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so two last questions there. What are the 3 skills that you think we need to learn that significantly impact success and meaning in life?
You need to know how to talk to people. That's important. And that comes with my second one, which is you need to understand your personality as well as others. So that you it helps you know the people you can work well with. And then the third thing is you need to know how to read numbers. You can have a finance manager, a CFO, but the person who makes the quality decision is you. They're not going to make that decision for you. Or if they do, it's based on their plans, really. So if your financial literacy is not where it should be, you need to pick it up. Like simple questions, I'll actually say that right now. Do you know what your gross profit is? Do you know what your minimum income is? I.e., do you know what your expenses are that you can't run away from every month?
Operating costs.
So if you don't know what those costs are, then you find people who can teach you. There's lots of people. Most governments now, especially in the Western world, are starting to invest in small business. So there's always something out there that you can attend on how to read a profit or loss,
Yeah.
how to read a balance sheet, because how can you grow assets, create assets, and grow assets if you don't know what they're worth?
Yeah. It's powerful. And what do you think will give more meaning in life for entrepreneurs?
Mindfulness.
Mm.
Like, I love my massages. I love to go for a float. I used to think jumping on a plane is what I needed to do,
Mm.
but it's literally in your back door. Like, go for a massage. Alone time is great if you can.
Mm.
I'm trying to hone into it because there's voices that I block out,
Mm.
thanks Netflix. And when the Netflix isn't on, those voices are just pitter patter, pitter patter. And listen to those voices. Don't be afraid of the silence because we're so busy right now. Like, you literally have to hire a studio to record an audiobook. That means your own house isn't quiet enough.
Sure, sure. And that's very powerful. I love those. Finding time for yourself, being mindful, massages or things that give you self-care. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, next time we do get you back on the show, definitely would love to dive in more about any self-care routines, or maybe if you don't mind, maybe just a few seconds to share what are some of those. We've touched on some, but we call them self-care routines in our tribe. So, what are some of your self-care routines that support you in your business development?
I I dance. I go to dance classes. We're like a little cult. So if you're at a gym and we're yelling, that's me. That's
Mm-hmm.
how I express my
Mm-hmm.
mental wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get my nails done.
Mm-hmm.
So I go and do that. I'm a former nail biter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, more like recovered nail biter. And I just like to listen to audiobooks. Um, Audiobooks or just podcasts because they're short. They're nice and short for a trip. Sometimes I wish I lived far away because I probably listen to two a day if I could.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the things I like. I go to the foreshore here in Perth and just park my car sometimes and have breakfast, just looking out to the river. It's the little things. It doesn't have to be a movie. It doesn't have to be. It's just self time, relationship with self. And if you're not a parent, do it now.
Mm. Nice, I love that. Thank you. So, just the last question on this. What's your definition of entrepreneurial success? Personal definition.
Entrepreneurial
Success.
success.
So, as being a successful entrepreneur, how would you define that? Success is different relative for everybody. But your
Everybody.
definition is entrepreneurial success. What's your definition?
It's got very little to do with the bank account. It's being able to achieve the things that you want to do. I would love to travel back to Zimbabwe 4 times a year and know my business is ticking over and come back. Or even just kind of travel maybe 6 months of the year, make my business digital. Then I can sit next to you in Bali, then
Yeah.
5,000 miles away or whatever, how far we are.
Mm.
So it's for me, it's lifestyle achievement. It's being able, like I said, I want to get to my deathbed and really have good laughs in my mind and not have woes and despair and regret.
Wow. Wow, great. And this last question that I learned from another podcast I really follow, but I really love it, is like, if you imagine yourself, you're at the end of your life, you've done everything you could, and there were three things that people could remember you by. What would that be? That you want people to remember
She loved to dance. She was a big smiler and laughed all the time.
you by?
Um, and then the other thing was she dressed really funky. How am I doing? It's
That's
all
really
outward.
good.
But
That's two, yeah?
that's too. But then the other thing is I want people to go, that woman helped me
Mm.
change my life.
Mm.
That's a big one for me.
Nice, nice. Now,
I
thank you
want people
so
to
much. Yeah.
remember me fondly and kind of go, Kat, gosh, I wonder where she is. She did an amazing thing for me.
Wow.
That.
Wow. Wow. No, that's really good. Thank you for that. So just a couple of last things there. What is there anything that you're working on that we could promote, or you've got a channel, you've got a website that people can find you, Instagram page where people can find you in terms of what you're working on? How do people get, what are the best ways people can get access to you or for business or
Well, they
pleasure?
can find me on Instagram. It's Cat Paz Creations, and they can see
Mm,
the other projects that I do on the side. I also have a small business segment, as you know.
mhm,
So that one is volunteer, but it's linked to aspirations, man.
mhm,
So there's that. And then my business is on Facebook, Kalahari Business Advisors. I've got a website as well,
mhm.
but look out for any webinars and stuff like that. I do Facebook Lives every now and again, just on current business issues and questions that I have from clients. So just look out. But I just love talking to people. If you have a hotel, can you invite me? Thanks. Great.
Sure.
2 nights, please.
I'll connect you on that too. All right, Catherine, just the last one. I just wanted to acknowledge you again, not just for your heart. You've got one of the biggest, courageous hearts I've ever seen. You took instruction from me
Oh,
at times
thank
when I
you.
wasn't so sure, but you followed through. And how many years has it been now? 8 years? 9 years? Since we started our journey together.
Yeah,
Just a sheer consistency of showing up the best way you can and just dealing with what's real and in front of you. And I think you're a huge inspiration to a lot of female entrepreneurs. And even as a black woman in Australia, doing business is one thing. And just your
thank you.
courage of continuing on with that legacy has been phenomenal. And, Ula, your daughter, I think, will just have such a great story to tell to show that you really delivered on your legacy. So thank you so much for the time on that, and just wanted to say you're an amazing person. So thanks for the time and investing on this.
Thank you, Aaron. You're amazing too.
Well, thanks so much. Bye.